Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Winner Takes All, written by Glacial Fury. The Admiral's office was large and well appointed, but far too stuffy for Asteron's tastes. He adjusted his gold-fringed purple shawl of office and sipped at the glass of fortified water, focusing on the Admiral's words rather than his own discomfort. With a final indignant fluff of his feathers, he settled into the grab seat's cushions, convinced she'd cranked the heat up just to be rude. Everyone knew Farstar preferred moderate climates, and fleet commanders resented inquisitors poking about their business. Wars have always been fought as a mere formality for the Galactic Council's loose collection of member nations, Admiral Tycan said. More theatrics than manners, a show of strength and grandeur for the masses. Asteron sat facing the Admiral's opal inlaid blackwood desk, lacquered and polished until it shone like glass. His avian features were purposely composed, a sea of unshakable serenity, as was appropriate for an Inquisitor of the Tower, only an expression of mild interest on his face. The Admiral continued, armies would show up, fight, and if your side lost, well, you paid some reparations, maybe a tribute signed a treaty, and that was that. Everyone got to go back to the business of governing a nation and turning a profit. Wars are expensive, you know, and not the province of madmen or savages. Merely a tool to acquire better trade agreements or squeeze more land into your borders. More often than not, just a saber rattling to soothe the wounded pride. Nothing more. What's changed, Admiral? Asteran adjusted his spectacles, not that he needed such to see. They were a decorative piece, something he fancied lent him an air of wisdom and enlightenment. Admiral Tycan stood with her four big hands clasped below the sharp crest that ran down her back, gazing through the large oval window of her office, looking at the fleet's vast orbital shipyards. I've always found this view to be breathtaking, she said, without turning to face the Inquisitor, ignoring his question. Don't you agree? Asteran peered past the Admiral's bulky flame, at the vast blue curvature of the Callus star floating in the begemmed blackness behind the shipyards. The faint suggestion of greenish-blue countenance peeked from beneath swirls of clouds within the sphere that was a glowing gem. An arresting scene for anyone. It is a striking view, he agreed, but only out of politeness. He wasn't here to discuss the scenery, no matter how inspiring. A mile-long fleet battle cruiser eased past outside the window, briefly obstructing his view of Callistar. He adjusted his spectacles and asked again, What changed as it pertains to war, Admiral? Why is this particular conflict so costly, both in terms of equipment and lives spent? Where does the failure begin? Admiral Tycan stiffened. Then her head slowly turned to peer at him with one slitted green eye over her shoulder. Asteran drew back from the gaze and swallowed hard. The Admiral was built like a Celestin rhino, a Golorian famed across the Galactic Council for her volatile temperament. Are you implying that this catastrophe is somehow Fleet Command's fault? Her voice was more than tart. It was hostile. I'll ask you to leave my office right now. No, he was quick to say. Nothing like that, Admiral. Nothing like that. The Council of Towers are only trying to understand how Fleet has lost more ships and their crews in the past 6 months than all the conflicts of the past 2 centuries combined. How is this possible? What has changed? Admiral Tycan snorted and turned her gaze back to the window. Your politicians are truly disconnected from the realities of the galaxy around them. She drew in a deep breath, then continued. What happened, you asked? I'll tell you plain. You and the Tower misjudged the humans. That's what happened. You sit in the safety of your halls and play dead politics, while we in Fleet meet the enemy on the field. I told you then, and I say it now, we should have found another way for the species. They are stubborn beyond stubborn, bull-headed enough to teach rocks to sing. You don't want to make war with such creatures. Surely the humans are not so difficult as all that. The idea seemed utterly preposterous to the Inquisitor. We've faced staunch resistance before and prevailed. The simulation's not like this. Admiral Tycan cut him off. Forget your simulations. She considered what she knew of humans. They were formidable, but not more than the Gek or the Polsters, but both warrior cultures of old. Humans were not monstrous creatures that swarmed with animal ferocity. What set them apart was their gritty will to win. In one of their armies was defeated, they did not simply retire to await terms. They regrouped and came back, again and again, until council forces wept at the sight of them. Humans refused to lose. How did one reason with such an enemy? She told the Inquisitor as much. The Arelin sector, she said, called Sol by humans, was the next parcel of space to be brought into the fold. The Inquisitor nodded impatiently, sipping his water. Yes, as it should be. I'll skip the fleet's failure to gain more than a foothold in the expansion. That is why you're here, yes? The Inquisitor nodded and began making odd gestures. I'll be taking notes, personal thoughts in the moment, and I must inform you that our conversation is being recorded in an official capacity. Admiral Tyken waved this away as unimportant. Let me start by saying humans do not observe the well-established conventions of war as any polite and civilized society should. She moved away from the window, across the office to the black opal liquor cabinet surrounded by hollows of plants from her homeworld, and poured herself a drink. As you know, 6 months ago, the writ came down from the council tower, approving the expansion into the Arelin sector. She lifted the cut crystal glass with 2 fingers worth of dark liquid lapping inside. Whiskey, she said. A human delicacy, I'm told. She paced a circle, sipping at the drink and gathering her thoughts. We'd Fleet made generous offers on several occasions for their kind to submit to the council. Ice clinked in the crystal glass when she took a sip. Each time we offered, they politely refused. We've dealt with stubborn species in the past, so no one gave it much thought, and the next steps on diplomacy were mapped out. The expansion must go on, yes? So the tower decided an expeditionary campaign into Sol system was in order. They believed a few token battles would be sufficient to convince the humans that joining us was the only way, despite my counsel to the contrary. Then the diplomats would be brought in to negotiate the finer points of the treaty and Sol's absorption into civilized society. The Inquisitor made notes on his integrated holographic HUD with slight gestures of his talons that made it seem like he was pawing at the air. Tyken stifled a laugh and covered the slip by taking another drink. What next? He said. The Admiral's great shoulders rose with an indrawn breath. The fleet mobilized, descended on Sol, and the campaign began with the siege of the Utopia defense ring. Things went fairly well at the start, yet nothing sets a human jaw more than a knife in the back. And that's how they saw our expansion, an unprovoked sneak attack. So they beat the drums of war. They refused to come to terms, Asteran said, his eyes absent, as he made his notes but still seeming surprised. What of trade treaties? Our offers fell on dead ears, but the tower was confident that within 2 months the humans would see the logical course was to come into the fold like so many others before them. But that didn't happen, the Inquisitor said, still taking notes. So it was an error at a political level, diplomatic. We need to know the exact cause so we can correct it in the future. The error, Admiral Tyken said, was to claim their species as our own. From what few humans we've managed to capture, I've learned that they do not see war as we do, as a tool of trade. When they fight, especially in response to an unprovoked sneak attack, it is an all-or-nothing bet. They do not stop until it is done. Winner takes all. The Inquisitor stopped his notes and blinked behind his spectacles. What does that mean, Admiral? Winner takes all of what? Admiral Tyken tossed back her glass with a growling sound of appreciation, then casually flung it across the office and ignored the crystalline cubes that scattered over a prized Ordelian gold thread rug. Just what I said. She sat down behind her desk and regarded the Inquisitor with unreadable eyes. Even the fine scales that drew the line down her forehead to her snout remained an impassive green and blue. Winner takes all. They fight until they have it all. All our systems, all our wealth, all our joy. They don't believe in slavery, so that is not a concern. But if victorious, they'll impose harsh reparations. We would become their vassals in all but name. Admiral Tyken had the brief satisfaction of watching abject horror spread across the Inquisitor's face. Now, he understood. Maybe. She drove reality home to the hilt. They will not surrender or come to terms, not ever. They will fight until the threat to their way of life has been neutralized. There will be no trade breaches, no matter how generous, to end the fighting with Sol. Asteran was speechless. He could only stare at her, beak working in silent disbelief. That isn't how wars are fought. Admiral, everyone knows that. Isn't it? She grunted. Seems someone forgot to tell the humans that fact. The Inquisitor blinked his beady bird's eyes at her. But they are hopelessly outmatched. Why not simply acknowledge that and get on with the business of trade treaties and everyone making money? Forget what you think you know, Inquisitor. Humans defy expectations. They are a small power, true, but growing and tenacious as a ghost hound and twice as stubborn. The best that can be expected is an endless state of war. None of the Tower want that. It's terrible for business. Now ask the rest of your questions and be quick about it. I'm very busy. There's a war on, you know. The Inquisitor's expression grew bleaker with each question the Admiral answered, and his beak paled from bright orange to a pallid yellow. When he finally left Admiral Tychon's office, it was with a thoroughly ruffled feathers and a firm understanding that the only mistake on Fleet's part was attacking the humans in the first place. The Tower's mistake was thinking to annex the Aurilan sector through force of arms. Long after Asteran had taken his leave, Admiral Tychon stood at a window, watching ships split past in the orbital fortress yard framed by the luminous planet beyond. The inquiry was over, but the answers she'd given and the disturbing thoughts they'd conjured still haunted her. Could humans actually fight this way to the heart of the Council? As Asteran had asked, could they threaten the Council's gates? What a horrifying thought. What was to be done with the enemy who refused to lose or consider terms? How could the Council make them see that it was in everyone's best interest for Saul to submit to the trade treaties and come into the fold? No answers came. She crossed the room, retrieved a glass from the carpet, poured another drink, and returned to her window. Ice chimed with each sip. Humans, she grunted, as she shook her head in grudging admiration of their courage and refusal to quit. It was all very romantic, after a fashion, yet her thoughts inevitably slipped to how things would be in another year, 2. Surely the humans must see reason long before then. A queasy feeling settled in her gut. Must they? Staring out at the Calistar, Admiral Tychon sipped a drink, and her words to Asteran echoed in her thoughts. Winner takes it all. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Caspar Arnholt, Cam Maxwell, it's difficult to pronounce, Lord Arishikal, Dragzoon, WRE, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.